Thank you, everybody, for being here for our 2015 celebration of our victories last year. Our vision statement is a dream for the world that we want to live in, and I think that the Worker Center is on this mission. The vision of the Worker Center is that all people are respected in the workplace, have a living wage, the right to organize, quality health care, housing, child care, transportation, access to healthy food and water, as guaranteed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, ratified by the United Nations in 1948. One of our big victories in this past year, which I think a lot of people didn't know about, was, I'm going to be a little bit quiet here because in a store that's located about 10 feet to my left, to your right, a clothing store, used clothing store, basically was misclassifying workers as being managers in a way to not pay them overtime. And one worker in particular, a young woman who wants to remain nameless, brought this to our attention. We brought it to the Department of Labor's attention. And you know, it's really important. One of the things that we now know is you cannot be considered salaried exempt worker and be paid less. Right now, it just changed to $656.25 a week. When we started educating the community about this in late November, like our phones have rung off the hook, emails. I mean, it's just like there are so many workers out there that are being misclassified and not being paid that at that point it was 600 and went up to 656.25. Also from the hotline, it was a combination, I believe, from the hotline and from one of our community union organizers, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We had two workers come to us, and you know, this is a campaign that we put a lot of energy into. We had two workers that came to us. They had seen our yard signs that were referred to by one of our community union organizers, I believe, Mr. Eric Bird, who you'll be hearing from later, saying, you got to go to the Worker Center because they can help you figure this out. Stanley McPherson and Milton Webb, who were two workers at the recycling facility, was then called Recommunity, came to us and saw our yard signs as well and said, well, the county's a living wage employer, we're doing county business, why are we not being paid a living wage? At that point, they were working for Kelly Temporary Services, which is a multinational temp service, if you will, and they were making $8 an hour. And then they were hired into the company, don't quote me, I think it was like 6 months in. It is my pleasure to introduce one of my favorite people in the world, Milton Webb.
Stanley came to me and asked me about the living wage, so we was getting it together. We got a TV show every Tuesday night from 7:30 to 8 o'clock on Pegasus, and it's been a long fight, and it's been hard, but we did it. We got a living wage for a lot of people, and especially down where I work. And I would have to say that thank you to the legislators and all the people that helped us out, COLA and all those guys that we did stuff with, and Pete and all of y'all and Stanley and you. And it was a long fight, but we did it. And we hung in there to keep it right and keep it straight, and we got it all straightened down, and everything is nice. And come on down to the recycling center. Drop your stuff off. That's where it's at.
I mean, they actually got a living wage starting February 3rd. They're starting a living wage. So I think you're getting like $400 more a month, right? A real important part of that victory, as Milton said, was the fact that it wasn't only Milton and Stanley, it wasn't only the Worker Center, it wasn't only all of us. It was actually some people on the inside. And it's my pleasure to introduce the Tompkins County Solid Waste Department head, Barb Ekstrom, who played a huge role in this.
While I've been trying to reduce waste in the county for the last 26 years, I've always been really involved in social justice issues. My parents were Holocaust survivors, and I think that helped pave my way. I wanted to thank both Stanley and Pete. Pete just was able to bring this around. He was able to join with the county and deal with all kinds of people and difficult circumstances. I mean, essentially what happened while the county administrator and I were working on a plan to help this happen, we ran into a serious obstacle, which was there wasn't really a legal way to do it since we were already in a contract with Casella Waste. And basically, what we did together with the folks there, you guys, we were able to figure out what additional work they could do to reduce waste even more. And that happened actually through the reuse center and bringing materials over to the reuse center, among some other things. But this wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had time to have conversation about it. And I was really, really grateful that Milton and the others were just so level-headed and calm, but kept on pushing. And so that's what I'm grateful for, and I'm really, really happy to be here today. And thanks for what you all do. But I will say, you're getting your first paycheck Friday, right? Right. All right. We'll see where this goes, and we'll go from there. And I will say that the legislature really kind of put the icing on the cake, even though Casella is shelling out over $100,000, and we're trying to help the costs with the new programs. The legislature came forward with a $20,000 one-time dollar amount to help us all. So it was a real team effort, and I'm just grateful. Thank you.
We have a gentleman in the Worker Center staff named Carlos Gutierrez. Carlos, could you just raise your hand so people can see you? Carlos does occupational safety and health trainings with immigrant and vulnerable workers and a special focus on dairy farm workers. And, you know, we've actually I believe we've had 3 deaths of dairy farm workers in the immediate area within the last 2 years. We brought a lot of attention and helped to bring when I first, 2 years ago, there was a dairy farm worker on Bostwick Road that was killed named Francisco Ortiz. And I saw this in the newspaper as a one-sentence thing in the Ithaca Journal. That says, dairy farm worker dies on farm on Bostwick Road, and that was it. I mean, like, that was what it was going to be left at. So we brought some serious attention to that. And if anybody knows of any groups of people, immigrants or other vulnerable low-wage workers who need to be trained, we're looking for people to train. So let Carlos or myself know, and we'll be in touch with you. So sometimes workers come to us and they do not feel comfortable in the workplace, standing up for themselves or standing up with each other. So there are times when we very much advocate for workers when they feel not safe doing it themselves. But it also means advocating for legislative change, and I want to briefly talk about something that the Worker Center has been involved with, is actually ending the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers in this state. There are 7 states that actually have eliminated that. Tompkins County, New York is actually $5 an hour right now for wait staff and $5.65 an hour for delivery drivers, $4.90 for resort workers. And the wage board, the New York State Wage Board, was convened by Governor Cuomo, and we traveled en masse in October to Syracuse to testify at a wage board hearing. And I want to mention, I was actually reached out to, strangely, I don't know what to make of this, by the Department of Labor. Actually, the communications director reached out to me, who was an IC grad, and we had really connected at this wage board hearing. And their recommendations are increasing tipped workers from $5 to $7.50. Now, we know that's not a living wage. Joe Wetmore, Autumn Lee's bookstore owner, I said, how come you're advocating this? This is not a living wage. And I said, you know what? And somebody like Eric Bird, who you're going to hear from in a second, this is going to put like $250, $300 more a month in his pocket. One of my main guys in Tompkins County is a delivery driver for Papa John's, and he's come out of the closet about Papa John's. And I want you to hear from Eric about being a tipped worker. Eric Bird.
I'm Eric Bird. I work for Papa John's. I'm a delivery driver, a Worker Center member. I make $6 an hour at Papa John's. I average maybe $8 to $9 an hour in tips. My wife used to do domestic work. Anyway, my wife had a bunch of domestic clients. The '08 financial crisis kind of slowly scared all those people off, and now my wife does not have anything. So it's just me. And last year and this year, we were forced to apply for HEAP. And we got a $600 benefit last year and this year. And I'd like to tell you today why you should be in favor of the tip wage increase. Okay. If anyone is in this room who owns property or pays rent, If you pay rent, then you're paying rent to someone that owns property. And those people are paying property taxes to the state of New York. Or if you make above a certain income, then you're paying some income taxes to New York. That means you directly contributed to me, being able to make ends meet, and thank you for that. But it would help you to know, I think, I'm not lazy. My boss won't give me more than 33 hours a week. I'm working on another project to start a business. It's going well, but it hasn't really panned out in terms of income yet. So I've been focusing a lot of my efforts on that. I am enterprising. My boss would tell you that I'm one of his top people, but he doesn't want to give me more than 33 hours a week, and I'll tell you why. He wants to be able to call me if someone calls out. So he doesn't want to give me 40 hours because then if he had to call me later, he'd have to pay me overtime. He doesn't want to do that. So those are the limitations that I'm dealing with. The problem then is not that I'm lazy or that I don't work hard enough. The problem is that I don't get paid enough. If you're paying taxes and you contributed to, my heat benefit, if it's because Papa John's is not paying me enough money, then the tax money that you're paying is ultimately padding the bottom line of Papa John's International. And guess what? Papa John's International, the symbol is PZZA. They're traded as a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. Their stock is trading for $64 a share or thereabouts right now. And it's currently up about 60% from last September when the last uptrend started. So, if you own property or you pay rent, that means that some of your money went to pad the bottom line for that success for all of the shareholders of Papa John's. But the biggest welfare queens in our system wear $5,000 pinstripe suits. They sit in, behind mahogany desks, and they don't live in Tompkins County or even upstate New York. They live in Missouri and Kentucky. If my wage goes up from $6 an hour to $7.50 an hour, that would gross me another $2,400 a year, and I wouldn't need to apply for heat benefits. And unfortunately, that means that Papa John's stock would only go up 40% instead of 60%.
Another aspect to our advocacy work is our Living Wage Employer Certification Program, of which we were the first in the nation to ever do. I'll talk a little bit about more of that later. We actually had 10 new living wage employers last year, and we've already had 5 new living wage employers this year. Trumansburg Community Nursery School, Weaver Wind Energy, Schlatter, Stumbar Parks and Salk, that's, yes, Ray Schlatter, Viridius Property, which does sustainable apartments, and another government entity, the Town of Caroline. And I would like to introduce a Town of Caroline board member to just briefly talk about why the Town of Caroline thought this is important, John Freisha.
My wife Nancy and I make it a tradition to protest Walmart on Black Friday, and I hope you'll join us next year, although I think most of you already did. Well, I thank you, Pete, and everyone here for the work that you're doing, and the Town of Caroline is very pleased and proud in a very small way to be part of it. I've been on the board 1 year, and before I ran for office, I often thought of politics on the national level, and that's where the big change happens. And what I have learned very much and to heart is that it all happens here, and that it happens in the grassroots, and it happens one by one. So when our supervisor, Don Barber, talked to the board about the value of it, for us it was a no-brainer. One, it's the right thing to do, right? I don't know how anybody can look somebody in the eye and say, I don't want you to have a living wage. I don't want you to be able to have the benefit of enjoying the arts from time to time, or affording the $5 to go to the park in the summer. These are things that build our communities. So for us, it was a no-brainer, and I want to tell you, we, as a board, ratified it unanimously. How many people, by show of hands, know if the board or the government in your locality is a living wage employer? Raise your hand if you know. Okay, quite a few, good. If you don't know, I'm going to challenge you to find out. And if you do know and your local government isn't, I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to call out the local governments in Tompkins County and beyond that aren't, and I'm going to challenge you to become one. This is economic justice, and if we want to truly, truly give people economic freedom, we need to give them money to move through the system. And that actually benefits all of us. Eric was right on the money. If someone doesn't have to worry about, can I make rent? Can I feed my family? Guess what? The rest of us don't have to. The things that conservatives talk about, like welfare and food stamps, these horrible things that we give to people, right? We don't have to because they won't need them. That's why this matters. That's one of the reasons Caroline is on board with this, and I encourage you and I implore you to do it in